Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Development Health Podcast. And the Movie Club has reconvened for our monthly chat about a film together. We are small but mighty this month, as Joe and Kevin are both joining me. Joe, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. I for a minute I thought you were gonna make a Danny DeVito joke about saying that we're small and mighty, but then I feel like that hit a little too hard.
I left that to you, Joe. So
You
there
knew
you
that I was
go.
gonna do that, huh? You know me pretty well.
And let's get on that segue. So we are talking about The Ratings Game, a TV movie from 1984 from director Danny DeVito, and starring Danny DeVito as Vic DeSalvo. So here's a little synopsis. A newly rich New Jersey trucker moves to Hollywood and creates a slew of hit TV shows by manipulating the rating system with help from his girlfriend in the ratings business. This movie is aggressively Italian American from New Jersey, but let's get started. So, did any of us see this before?
No, no.
I don't think so, but I'll get into it.
You might
I
have.
might have. Yeah.
Yeah. But Joe, what were your general thoughts on the ratings game?
So I nominated this movie. This is my first time checking out because, as you guys probably know from past podcasts and just knowing me, I am a huge fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Mhm.
Also, just a really huge fan of Danny DeVito, and it's always boggled my mind why he has not directed anything, a feature length movie since Duplex in the mid 2000s, because up to that point, small filmography, but he's had some really solid directorial debuts that were dark humor, funny satire, really sharp writing, great actors coming on board. Like, to me, it's kind of cool that he's still acting and he's still doing something. But like when it comes to his professional work, he actually is a very legitimate. I think he's a legitimate director. I mean, we
Mhm.
talk about our childhood. We've all seen Matilda at one point in our lives,
Love
right?
Matilda.
It's a fantastic movie, but it also embodies a lot of his style, and he has a very specific style of filmmaking. Um, so to find out that he had a directorial debut that was on YouTube, I was like, this is a great film to nominate. It wasn't until I realized until the second movie I watched that he directed, which was actually theatrically released, Don't Throw Mama Off the Train, that I realized that this was actually a TV movie, which kind of surprised me. And at the same time, it kind of didn't. It did have like a low budget vibe to it, but in a low budget vibe that actually reminded me of the predecessor. This almost felt like the predecessor to It's Always Sunny in the Philadelphia. Granted, the cast, you know, uh, Glenn, Rob, and Charlie, the guys who made that show, did not create the ratings game, but
Mhm.
it's very easy how Danny DeVito would be close to these guys because I think they probably get along on the same wavelength.
Mhm.
Um, General thoughts about this movie is I just feel like this is Danny DeVito doing Danny DeVito things, and if you like that, you are going to enjoy it. There's the idea of the story I think is kind of relevant. Well, I wouldn't say the satire is super strong, but the idea of people trying to cheat their way into the system, especially when it comes to Hollywood, is not too far from the truth. I mean, I
Mhm.
think in some ways there is kind of a strong satire. There is something there, but because it's a TV movie or there's certain limitations to that, I think they could have went a step further. Like if this was a Danny DeVito movie that was directed at theater, like if you watch this and then watch Don't Throw Mama Off the Train or like his other movies right afterwards, he would go way more deeper into that satire and into the story. Whereas for now, they kind of just focus on, you know, him being an Italian American from New Jersey, which, as Shane and I are, we kind of embody that. I just know watching this movie, Shane, seeing the opening with his license plate and the music and the car and his comments, I was like, Shane, you're gonna enjoy this, aren't you?
Because Joe didn't make it to watch it with Kevin and I, because usually it's funny because we're the three that will actually watch these movies together, since we're close in proximity. and Matt works on Saturdays. But like I was turned to Kevin, I'm like, I really do wish Joe was here for this one because this would have
Yeah.
been so much fun to watch with.
That's
Because
apparently the second time too, because when you and Matt went to go see Conclave, I found out that the villain's name was Cardinal Tedesco. So it's like the
yeah,
second
because like,
time.
oh my god, it's Joe. Joe but vapes.
But he,
He
Good villain.
vapes. But Kevin, what were your general thoughts on the ratings game?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, Joe, it's funny that you mentioned we've all seen Matilda at some point. I just watched that for the very first time this afternoon before hopping on this call.
all right.
Not even related to this. It was just on my watch list, and I just got to that today.
There you
Really
go.
enjoyed that. So now I've seen two Danny DeVito directed movies in a row. I enjoyed this one. I always like a fun little 80s comedy. That's a fun era for comedy movies in general, I think. And I like this era of Danny DeVito. It's been a while since I've seen an older Danny DeVito film. Um, and like you were saying with It's Always Sunny, there was a particular scene where he's at the restaurant pretending to be talking to the network executives next to the plant behind all those people's tables on the patio. That felt like a skit that was straight out of It's Always Sunny.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I would kind of describe the entire movie as feeling like an extended sitcom episode or
Hmm.
something. I do like that style of comedy.
Yeah.
This hit for me. Um, it was kind of lighthearted. I guess there's not too much in the way of plot to make it convoluted or anything. It's kind of easy viewing. I enjoyed it. I really like the chemistry between Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman in particular, which obviously makes sense to them having been married in real life. Yeah, it was a fun time.
Yeah, I laughed a lot. Kevin can attest. I laughed at so many Italian things that happened in this movie, which this is pre RoboCop, pre UHF, like making fun of like absurdist TV shows and commercials and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And so like this is a little bit ahead of its time for some things to come after this. Like everybody loves like the RoboCop. It's like I'd buy that for $1 and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But like this, the shows he came up with was like Nunzio's Girl, which is about a pimp. Um, and that one show where he hired like cast his nephew. And he looks so awkward staring at the screen. But then Goombas, the animated fish show, I'm like, I want this to be a real show. Like I
It's
would watch.
Squidbillies before Squidbillies with Italians, if you think about it.
They they should totally make Goombas into an animated show and have the cast of Always Sunny be the cast in it, and
Goombas.
it would be a hit. It would be a humongous hit. I would watch it in a minute. And it's funny because we just watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Danny DeVito and Vincent Chiavelli in it, who him as Skip is like the most obnoxious like gay character you're gonna find. But like the cutaway gags to him on that boat where they kidnap they trick a whole bunch of families to get on this boat, which that's a fun gag they keep going back to, and the fact that they're like, whatever happened to those families?
they're
Which
just
is a
they're just stuck out at sea. Like no, they can't
yep.
go to work. You know,
Which
Michael Richardson is in their house.
those are fun cutback gags to Michael Richardson sitting there eating pizza on the couch, just commentating about the television. He even had like a brief Jerry Seinfeld
Yeah.
cameo at the very beginning. And like Ronnie Graham is Captain Andy, who is who has a parrot but does not do ventriloquism. He just says it in the voice right next to the parrot.
Oh
It's so
yeah.
silly. But
Forgot
like
that detail.
I did really enjoy the budding romance between Vic and Francine because you had Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman have great chemistry. The the mugging at the camera ness of his sitcom that he comes up with, where he's just like looking at the camera at moments. It's just so much fun. Yeah, this film, like, I don't think the satire is particularly biting fresh or anything like that, but there's some creative jokes and gags in this. It's legitimately funny from start to finish. Danny DeVito is insanely charismatic and carries this film despite that he is such a teeny little man. But he fills up every single scene with his personality. It's just, this was such a fun time, and I'm glad I watched it because, like, I don't think this ever would have been on my radar unless I wound up finally like covering Danny DeVito on my one director show. But like, this was just a fun time for sure, start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to add to that too and say that I feel like Danny DeVito and this comes up in his movies later too. He has a knack, and it always comes back to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia too. Like he has a knack for making really despicable people. Like if you really think about it, Vic DeSalvo is not doing something really good. He's kidnapped a bunch of people to
Yes.
get his shows to be watched on TV. Like that's not a really good thing. But for some reason, by God, you fall in love with him. You know, like he's not, you
Mm.
don't see him as the bad guy, despite the fact that Rhea Perlman many times is telling him, like, you're gonna go to jail. And plenty of
Yeah.
times throughout the movie, she's there to remind him that. I do want to add, and I'm glad you guys brought up the chemistry between the two of them. It is so good to see them together because they do bounce off of each other really well. Like it's kind of why it blows my mind that it took her like 20 years or like what 16, 17 seasons of It's Always Sunny to finally show up on a season
Season
as a
16
cameo.
is when she
Yeah,
showed
on
up.
season
Yeah.
16 as a cameo. Um
Dee's
I
neighbor.
Yeah, I think it's funny too because like there was a part where they were getting to know each other. And I'm like, there's a good chance this is autobiographical. Because I was like, is Rhea Perlman from New Jersey? And it turns out she's more from Brooklyn, but like still, it kind of made sense that they got along with each other just on that East Coast type of vibe. And I think they're the same height, so it kind of works out.
Yeah. She's like a little bit taller than
Just a
just
smidgen.
a smidge. It just, I guess, were there particular gags or jokes that really stood out to either of you?
I really liked the Goombas TV show. I know we were talking about it before we started the recording, but
Yeah.
a lot of those fake TV shows, like you said, it wasn't necessarily biting satire, but it felt like a good representation of like cable TV of that era in a general sense. So maybe it wasn't that biting, but it felt real, like something
Yeah.
that could be on a real channel somewhere.
Yeah, like it wasn't completely out of the ordinary with
Yeah.
like with Tropic Thunder, where it's just so lampoonishly cartoony. Like,
Mhm.
there's a part of me that felt like, yeah, I could see Goombas being on Adult Swim. I could see this being late night, Adult Swim humor. Like, that's
Mhm.
where it it almost makes me feel like the and part of me really felt like this early on in the movie that Vic DeSalvo as a filmmaker, as a guy who's trying to break into the business, is not necessarily he's the underdog,
Yep.
because in some ways most of his scripts are like the ones that he's worked on, despite the fact that they're very like over the top in New Jersey, would probably be okay on TV. And I think that's what it's trying to show too, is that despite them being like outlandish and over the top, I think he does put effort into what he's trying to produce.
Mm.
So, which only makes it, you know, I mean, which makes it more relatable for me to root for him because you do kind of want to see him get his show. And I think that's what ends up happening at the end is like, despite the fact that he pretty much ambushed television, he did manage to find popularity
Yeah.
out of his show with the People's Choice Awards. So it's not like he completely gamed the system. Like there's a part where people do eventually find out and watch the shows and actually do like Goombas or they do like Nunzio's
Mm.
Girls. The show where he's playing the Princeton graduate, I think is adorable considering the fact that he's like, no Princeton student would sound less like, hey,
Oh yeah.
I'm from New Jersey. Princeton's in New Jersey. That's how they talk. And like
You're gonna tell me how people talk in New Jersey?
Listen, I'm living in my parents live in Princeton Junction, New Jersey. We bumped into a lot of the college kids. It's not anything different.
It just the that whole with what is it? Parker Braithwaite, the executive, where he fires people with a television recording.
I was going to say that one. Yeah.
So funny. It's just like, can you just leave the tape on?
Kind of
And
felt
then,
ahead of its time in a way.
yes. I'm like, it's up in the air. Um, years before Up in the Air became a thing. Um, but it's just there's so many fun little gags there, and then the whole sycophantic relationship that Braithwaite develops with him after it's like, oh my god, he beat the World Series. Well, of course his shows are great. And it's just like it felt like that moment where Mugatu's trying to like schmooze Zoolander, and he's like, what is this, a school for ants? And he's like, he's absolutely right.
And he's totally gaming him too. Like he's getting
Yeah.
their own studio, which looks like any Italian restaurant, but it's got secretaries like answering calls.
Oh, yeah.
I looked at his
Paisan Productions.
Paisan
That's what they called
production.
it. Yeah.
I just love the fact that his office looks like Asbury Park. Like it's got cotton candy, it's got the backdrop of Asbury Park. I just thought that was adorable.
He made the living room in his house like the golden nugget.
Yes.
And then the mob guys are just like, what does this look like? And his brother's like, it's modeled after the golden nugget. He's like, that's great. That's great.
Unrelated, but I just watched Matilda. One of the children in the school had an Asbury Park lunchbox in that movie.
Nice.
Oh.
See, now we have to go back and watch that. Will be a future recommendation from Joe. Probably for a future month. But it's just this film just has a lot of charm to it. It's consistently funny throughout. It has silly gags, and like I don't think there's like a ton that has aged poorly. There's like a couple of
Yeah.
things.
Maybe
Like,
just like the gay character a little bit.
which the funny thing is like Vincent Schiavelli is still funny. And like
Yeah.
some of his lines are just
The
like
gag still
hilarious.
worked.
Like him trying to like just like the whole entire thing with like the party and just going all out and then like, nobody shows up. Um oh, I forgot to mention one of the best characters in the film is oh, what's his name?
Bruno,
His Bruno is Driver.
the driver.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Where have I seen him before? A lot
Frank
of things, probably.
Frank Severo was in Goodfellas, The
Goodfellas.
Godfather Part 2,
There you go.
The Wedding Singer. Oh yeah, he's his brother-in-law in The Wedding Singer, isn't he? So like was he on The Sopranos? Because like I feel like he gotta be at some
I mean, at
point.
that point, I feel like he was
But
born.
no, I loved Bruno. He
It's
was
definitely
such a ride or
Godfather,
die.
Goodfellas. I know him from.
You're right. He's just a cool backup guy. Like he's like, you want me to go take care of him, boss? Like he's just there for you.
I'm trying to emulate his eyebrows. And he's just like, you know, you want me to go find somebody who's more your type? And, like that whole entire thing is just like, um, what is it? I I only date pretty women who don't actually like me.
Oh, yeah. He's like, this is a step up. Now I'm dating pretty women who don't actually like me.
Yeah, like that whole entire thing. But like, this is just a fun time. I don't know how
Yeah.
much more I have to say about it because like it's a silly, fun comedy. It has some fun like nods at like the television system and how everything was about ratings.
Yeah.
Netflix killed that because now it's like, how do we even judge if things are a success or not? How many people watch it this weekend? Views. And
Mhm.
I don't even know if I'd be able to tell you how the rating system works. Um, just seems way too convoluted. Why don't you just do it based off of who watches?
it's
Like the
it's
number of
interesting that you're
Always been
saying that too.
convoluted.
it's just
It,
ridiculous.
it's
Just
interesting that you're saying that too, because it kind of reminds me why we were talking earlier before we recorded how Gen Alpha's humor is, to me, it's so hard to pinpoint, but that's just because there's so much content, right? That there really is a hard way of determining what is popular and what really isn't. Like
Mm.
every week I go online and I find out about a celebrity that got popular on YouTube that I never even heard about. It's like, oh, we're going to talk about the downfall of this person. Of who? This person had a downfall? This person was
Yeah.
at a peak? What's going on?
Who even is that?
Who is that?
Very well exemplified in the scene on the cruise where they're like, "Well, let's just talk to each other then," and it's dead quiet. Oh, did you see
How
last
about that
week's episode
episode
of
of
Dallas?
Dynasty?
Yeah, Dynasty. It was just a different media landscape back then, which I think this movie exemplifies that landscape pretty well.
Well, and it's really hard to have like water cooler shows anymore because one, workplaces are very different. It's not like everybody's like working in the office and are there together, but also like it's really hard for everybody to be watching the same shows
Hmm.
because there's just so much goddamn content.
I think the last time we got close was when Tiger King came out.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone watched Tiger King
But
because
it was
like
also because everybody was forced to work from home versus there
yeah,
being more
Right.
ambiguity.
well, I think the last like real series that so many people watched and talked about on a regular basis was Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Yeah.
And now it's even like even some of the like the Marvel and Star Wars shows don't even get that much viewership. Like Daredevil, which is amazing, the new Daredevil is getting worse viewership than Acolyte did.
Oh, there's definitely oversaturation when we're talking about Marvel in particular
Yeah,
Mm.
and Star Wars.
and Star
It's
Wars.
just it's it's a shame, but we'll all be back talking about The Last of Us when that comes back. But no, I feel like this is a fun watch too because at least we grew up in an era where network television was still a thing, was still like the primary like medium for people to be watching stuff. Or if like our parents, I don't know about you, but my dad and my stepmom sure love everything Taylor Sheridan. Um, Yellowstone. But it's a fun time. Do either of you have anything else that you want to add about the ratings game?
I was
Yeah, I
actually going to
was.
ask.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was going to actually ask you guys, but then I feel like I answered my own question as you were talking about it, Shane. But I was going to ask if they were to make like a version of the rating game for today's audience, what would it look like? But the more and more I
Streaming.
think about, what was that?
It would have to be streaming.
It
Like
would
I
have to
feel
be
like it would have
streaming.
to be about streaming.
And it also got me thinking about how, technically, if they were to do something like that, they would probably just talk about. I mean, the basic issue is that Vic wants to get his shows to be made, which now that I really think about it, he would probably have no problem doing that. I mean, he would probably have to find his viewership, and maybe the movie would be
Netflix.
centered around that, right?
It'd be on Netflix, but they get canceled after one season.
Yeah, I guess you still sort of get pilots where it's like a short season or something, essentially. You could still do it. The mechanics of how they do their scheme would have to be way different. It would have to be so many users had this show or whatever pushed to their homepage or something like that. Some hacking involved.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that like
Which
they would crack the algorithm of a streaming
Oh my
service.
gosh.
right.
It would be so funny if everybody's recommendations would just be centered around New Jersey crap.
Yeah.
Like just, and it would
Bring us
probably
back to
go,
'09.
and imagine if
Jersey
instead of,
Shore was popular.
yeah,
Oh my god.
they got to make commercials, they got to create fake products. Like it would get really into It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia territory, like Wolf Cola type stuff.
Oh yeah.
And if they made it today, it would be the gang.
Yeah,
Like they would all be in it, I think, for
yeah.
Yeah, that
sure.
would fit right in. Yeah.
Charlie would be the main character. The waitress would be the love interest. Dennis would be the television executive. And Mac would probably be Bruno or some form of Bruno, or maybe just the
I
the
can
Mike
see it.
Cervelli character.
Hey, It's Always Sunny already riffed on the last movie we covered. They could always do this one.
There you
I
go.
don't see why not.
Love to see it.
Uh,
But Kevin, what were you going to bring up?
oh yeah, I was having a little bit of deja vu while I was watching this movie. I think there's a chance I might have seen this on cable or something just a long time. I might have been a kid. Some scenes I felt like I had directly watched before, but I don't remember the movie in full. But I think I've seen pieces of it. This might have been one of those things I caught flipping through the channels one day because I didn't entirely. It didn't feel entirely new to me. I felt like I'd seen scenes from this before. I don't know.
It's just like one of
Doesn't
those
really
special,
have to do with anything. I
yeah, it's
thought
just
that
one
was
of those
interesting.
moments where you're just like,
I've been there. I've seen this before.
It's fitting because it was a TV movie, so it could have just
yeah,
been syndicated.
could have easily been.
Yeah,
I want what network did this come out on? Was
Showtime.
it
Showtime. Oh
Showtime.
yeah, okay.
that's a crazy thing. I didn't even realize some of those stations were that old.
Yeah, I know.
Like Showtime and HBO and stuff like that.
Well,
Produced by
HBO I think did
Viacom.
come out around that time too.
Hmm.
Because there was a show I watched. I took I actually took a sitcom writing class in undergrad, and there was a show that Gary he died a couple of years ago, and he was in Iron Man 2.
Gary
Gary,
Sheeling, she,
it starts with an
yeah.
F. And he had a very popular show that predates The Sopranos in the '80s. That was an HBO exclusive.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can you just imagine how much a little prick can hurt? Yeah, from Iron Man. Also,
Oh,
Hail Hydra. Uh, so Hail Hydra. He was the first Hail Hydra whisper. But
yeah. People
yeah,
aren't whispering it these days.
nope, not in real life. Not in real life, Kevin. They're not
Hail
whispering
Tesla.
anything anymore.
Hail
But
Doge with the little coin.
oh my. Well, what a world we live in, and what a world the ratings game was for sure. It was a fun time, and we had a fun time talking about it. And I hope all of you listening tune in for next month when we do our annual animation pick. So, as this is our beginning of April episode, next month will be our May episode where we pick an animated film. And what can it be? Is it darkly disturbing for adults or is it for children? You'll have to tune in and find out. But, Joe and Kevin, thank you as always for coming on and chatting some movies. And then from Joe, from Kevin, and Shane, thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting the Development Hell podcast.